Okay, in this video I'm just going to try and run through a bit of like a spec comparison with the Panasonic GH6 and the new Panasonic G9 Mark II that's been announced. And as a kind of, pre-warning to this, I haven't got the G9 Mark II body in front of me, so it's a bit of a, a spec comparison without that, but I've sort of looked into it as much as I can, and if there are any little bits that are missing, feel free to drop them in the comments. But I feel like I've kind of got most of this kind of worked out from what I've seen. So essentially what I'm going to break it down into is like the body design, the features, and then the accessories as well. So sort of first off, we've got the body design. So the new Panasonic G9 Mark II shares its body with basically the new S series cameras, and one of the main reasons I think they've gone with that is because they essentially can then share accessories. So you can kind of switch between the S series and the MFT lineup for photography cameras without too much hassle, and it also means they can share things like the battery grip, which we'll come back to later in the kind of accessories bit. But essentially that body design is different to this, and that comes with obviously some changes, so we'll run through those quickly. And what we've got is basically the first big one in the body design really is the fans. On the GH6 we've got this really big kind of fan down the back to compensate for when we're doing video, and a lot of that I think is probably tied to the cards, and we'll kind of come back to that again. But the G9 Mark II, it doesn't actually even have a fan, not even the one that you'd find up behind the EVF on the new S series cameras. So it is down as kind of, they're saying unlimited recording. There's no caps or anything, like no 30-minute cap or anything like that, so you can record as long as you like on it. But they've replaced the fan at the top, or in this instance behind the screen, and they've actually managed to increase the in-body stabilization with the kind of space that they've saved. So they've kept that same form factor, but they've managed to do that. So that's quite impressive, really. I mean, a lot of these, that they're not pros for everyone, they're not cons for everyone. They're just differences. So just one thing to be aware, this and the S5 Mark II cameras, they've got fans. The G9 hasn't. It's just something to consider, obviously. And then we come on to kind of more physical attributes of the camera. Like we've got things like, one really useful thing I find for video is the lock feature there. So you can do things like lock shutter speed, you can lock your ISO, just basically anything you want to do while the camera's recording. You can just lock that off, and then you're not accidentally pressing buttons. So I believe there is a in-camera feature for lock, which I imagine you can get into the My menu, or maybe toggle it to a shortcut on the camera. I'm not 100% on that. Maybe someone can elaborate on that in the comments. But yeah, certainly the presence of a physical lock button is kind of not there. So the next thing we've got is the rear flip-out articulating screen. So this is really good. It's a really nice screen design. It's been in all the GH cameras so far back as I can remember, and it's a nice design because you can fold the screen back to front so it protects itself when you're traveling. You can flip it out, you can face it towards yourself. It's got everything there that you kind of need, and in my opinion it's one of the better screens that's been around in different camera companies. One thing they did to make it better for the GH6 is actually bringing this tilting function. So you've got two levels of tilt with it, and one really good thing about that, if you're shooting video, you've got HDMI port plugged in, maybe you've got USB-C plugged in, you're probably going to have headphones and most likely a mic plugged in. So sometimes getting the clearance on the screen is like a bit of a pain, and it's kind of awkward, and if you've got the camera rigged up, it's really difficult. So it's really nice now to be able to just lift that up for one, if you're doing low shots, and then if you're in the first setting, you can also lift it off, and it twists without sorry, it actually twists without touching any of the ports. You can see the fan kind of it's just going over the top of that but not touching anything else. So that's actually a really nice addition to this camera, and again, might not be something you need, but it's worth considering that it does have that tilt up screen. And the next thing we've got in here, we've got things, again this is sort of specifically video related. You've got things like the tally lamp, so when it's recording the lamps will flash to tell you that it's recording. You can switch these on or off if you want them on. They're there. If you don't, you can, like I say, you can switch them off. But it's a nice physical indication that the camera's recording, not only from the back but from the front as well. The next thing we've got on here is the audio menu. So again, you could probably map this to a button on the G9 Mark II, but it's something that's just kind of there in the design. Like I say, you know, the actual tops of these cameras are different anyway. So the old G9 obviously had that top screen, but they've swapped it out for the newer S5 Mark II body, like I say. So it's just not, it hasn't got that button. So if that's something you kind of find useful, then obviously that's not there in that body. And then we've got the where we're looking, the front record button. Again, probably only useful really if you're kind of recording yourself, but I do find that quite useful sometimes. You know, it's good to have as a feature button anyway. Just the more buttons the better really for being able to map and use for things, but that's there as a front recording button if you need it on this camera, again because it's more of like a video focused camera, so we've got that there. And another one actually on the front, we've got the sync port, and from what I can see there is no sync port on the G9 Mark II, so that's something to kind of check out. There are sort of ways around using that port, but it's again, it's another kind of physical feature that doesn't seem to be there on that camera. And again, like I say, with all of this stuff, you know, it's all just pros and cons as to how you work. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing either way, so it's just to know it's there. So the next thing we'll cover is the features. So obviously the big feature in the G9 Mark II, we've got the new autofocus, so we've got the face detect AF, whereas on this we're using the contrast based DFD system. And the G9 Mark II is still using that to an extent because it's a hybrid autofocus system. So you've got the phase detect, and when the phase detect isn't available, it falls back to DFD. So it's still there in the camera, but you've got that big improvement of the kind of phase detect as its kind of primary focusing option. So that's a really nice improvement to come in that camera. And then another feature we've got just in this in the top dial, this sort of falls under both, it's kind of under body design, but it's really a feature. We've got the additional options we can set to the C4 mode. So if you're a video shooter, it's really useful to have lots of different modes. You know, you can have all those different settings. You can have HD options set up under different frame rates. You can have 4K versions set up under different frame rates, open gate, all these things. So that's quite a nice thing to have there, but again, it might not be something you use. And the another one which potentially could come as a firmware update in the GH6, you know, it may do, is the real-time LUT feature. So we've got the view assist feature in this camera, so we can view what a LUT would look like, but we can't actually burn it into the footage. So or even you can use it for photography as well, but we don't have that in this camera. So that's a nice new feature that's now available in the G9 Mark II. And then of course the kind of other headline feature really, apart from the frame rate, not the frame rate, sorry, apart from the focus, we've got the burst rates in the G9 Mark II, and you know they're much higher than what's available in the GH6. I mean, if you're going to buy the GH6, you're probably buying it more as a video first camera, so you know if those burst rates are really important to you, you want to be looking more really at the G9 Mark II, and it's got the pre-burst feature as well, which is a really nice option, you know, so you've got those huge burst rates and pre-burst as well, which is really nice. Another very small feature is they've added the Leica monochrome profile, which is just a black and white profile really, that's been, you know, it's a Leica standard one, so it looks nice. Like I've seen a few pictures taken in it. It looks good. You know, it's not really a deal breaker, I don't think, for many people, that one, but it's nice to have that in the newer cameras. One of the big ones for video. So obviously the G9 Mark II has been built mostly as a photography camera, but it's very comparable really to the GH6 in a lot of its options, and you know, a lot of its shooting modes. And one of the really big things that makes it quite appealing is that the GH6 was the first camera to get the what's known as kind of the DR boost functionality that they added in, that kind of gives it this I guess it's almost like a digital dual game sort of system. And there were some things in there that made it slightly clunky really on the GH6. You know, the bass in Vlog was 2000, which really is too high. And you essentially, in the G9 Mark II, they've really improved that. So you've got 100 ISO for normal profiles, and then 500 for Vlog, which is much more reasonable really. And also you don't need to turn it on and off, which is a real bugbear for a lot of people, I think, in this camera, that only works up to 60 FPS, and you need to switch it on and off, and it wouldn't let you come out of 60 FPS if you have it on. And it's just one of those things. It's like, it's not a bug, but it's just very annoying to work with. So on the G9 Mark II, obviously they've taken on what people have said and they've put that into the new camera, so that's great. It's like, you know, there's big improvements made in that area. It looks a lot cleaner and a lot easier to work with, which is nice. Another nice photo feature that the G9 Mark II has, and the GH6 didn't get, is live view composite, which obviously you can imagine, because again, this is the video first camera and the G9 Mark II is supposed to be the photo first camera. And live view composite essentially allows you to kind of do long shutter recordings, and you can just watch the picture build up on the back of the screen, so you know, light trails, that type of thing, and then you just hit the shutter when you want it to end. So you're essentially seeing your long exposure shots kind of build up on the back, which is a really nice feature. You know, I do really wish they had that in the GH6, but you know, like I say, they've got that kind of line there between the two systems, so you can kind of see why it's not there. A big benefit for the GH6, if you are looking at it from a video point of view, so we've got the fan in there like we said before, and I think part of the reason it needs that fan is because we've got the CF Express card internally. And this is sort of a double-edged sword, you know. CF Express cards are expensive, but they are much better performers than SD cards. So you can essentially shoot everything internally on this. Every video mode available is internal. All the ProRes modes, all eye compression modes, they're all there, all available on that card, which is really good. And like I say, it's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's an expensive card. Your card slots don't match up, which is a little bit of a pain. But yeah, it is a benefit to be able to record everything internally. That is nice. I won't lie, I do find that very useful. And the G9 Mark II, they've been very generous actually with the video features on it. So where the SD card can't record those all-eye features and ProRes, what they've done is they've allowed you to go out over SSD and record through that, which is really nice. You know, they've not capped the features in any way. They've just taken that limitation and got around it in a different way, which is really nice. And then the last thing we'll come to is just accessories. So this is pretty quick rundown. We've got, as far as I've heard on this, so we can use the old GH5 batteries in the GH6. So that's like the old DMW BLF19E batteries. But in the G9 Mark II, it doesn't sound like they work in there. It's just for this one, backwards compatibility. And it does limit some of the video modes. I'll link to a video about that up in the corner. It does limit some of the video modes, but if you've got old batteries like that, then it's great because they do work. And we've got no option for a battery grip either on this camera, which we sort of touched upon earlier. The new G9 Mark II is able to use the same battery grips as the S5 Mark II, so that's really useful, and obviously a big photography feature. If you're shooting photography, it's great to be able to use a battery grip. You get that extra battery, but also you get that nicer portrait shooting kind of feel, and you get the shutter and even a joystick to be able to work with in that kind of portrait mode. And then the last one I was going to cover was just RAW recording over HDMI. So this is ProRes RAW for Atomos monitors, and for Blackmagic we've got Blackmagic RAW over the Blackmagic Video Assist, and currently we do have that we do have that available for this camera, so up to 4K 60. And for the G9 Mark II, there's no word of it yet, but you never know, it could come along later. I wouldn't buy it expecting it, but you may find that actually comes later down the line, because sometimes these things do come at launch, even post-launch, so it's something that potentially could come to the camera. So yeah, that's just a bit of an overview between the two cameras, and yeah, hopefully that's been kind of helpful. If it has, give the video a like. If you want to see more content like this, then please subscribe.